There is a clay prism in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, roughly 20 centimeters tall, inscribed on all four faces in Sumerian cuneiform. It was recovered from the site of ancient Larsa in 1922 and presented to the museum by Herbert Weld Blundell. Its catalogue number is AN 1923.444. It dates to approximately 1800 BCE. The text on this prism is a list of kings. It starts before the beginning of the world and runs through every dynasty the Sumerian scribes considered legitimate, from the first city that ever received the gift of kingship to the last dynasty the scribe bothered to record. It is called the Sumerian King List, and the first thing it says is that civilization did not begin with us. The opening line reads, "After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu." Then it lists 5 cities: Eridu, Bad-tibira, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak. 8 kings ruled those 5 cities. Their combined reigns totaled 241,200 years. And then, on the prism, there is a single line that divides everything that came before from everything that came after. The flood swept over. After the flood swept over, and the kingship had descended from heaven. The kingship was in Kish. That is the oldest recorded civilizational reset in human literature. 5 cities, 8 kings, 250,000 years. Then a flood. Then everything starts over. Thorkild Jacobson published the critical edition of the Sumerian King List for the University of Chicago in 1939, Assyriological Studies, Volume 11. Piotr Mikolovsky of the University of Michigan revisited the text in the Journal of the American Oriental Society in 1983 and called it a chronicle of the one monarchy, a political document structured entirely by the concept that civilization is transferable and destructible. Kingship does not belong to a city. It moves, it arrives, it stays, it leaves, and when it leaves, the city that held it falls. The Sumerian scribes did not stop at the flood. The king list continues after Kish. Kingship moves to Uruk, then to Ur, then to Awan, Hamazi, Akkad, Gutium, back to Uruk, back to Ur. Each transfer is marked by the formula, "Then city fell," and the kingship was taken to city. Every transition is a destruction. Every new beginning presupposes the end of something that came before. The prism itself is a record of cycles. Rise and fall, build and destroy, start over. The Atra-hasis Epic, preserved on 3 tablets in the British Museum catalogued as BM 78941, BM 78942, and BM 78943, fills in the space the king list leaves blank. The tablets were inscribed by a scribe named Epic Aya during the reign of Ammisaduqa of Babylon, roughly 1646 BCE. W. G. Lambert and A. R. Millard published the definitive edition at Oxford in 1969. The Atra-hasis Epic describes what happened between the creation of humanity and the flood. And what it describes is not one catastrophe, but 4, each separated by 1,200 years. The first cycle, humanity is created from clay and the blood of a slaughtered god. The species grows. It multiplies. It becomes noisy. Enlil, the chief executive god of the Sumerian pantheon, cannot sleep. 1,200 years after the creation, he sends plague. The Akkadian text names the agent, Namtar, the god of pestilence. Humanity should die. But Enki, the god of wisdom, warns a man named Atra-hasis. He tells him to organize mass prayers to Namtar. The plague god is flattered by the attention and lifts the disease. Humanity survives. The second cycle. Another 1,200 years pass. Humanity grows loud again. Enlil sends drought. He instructs Adad, the storm god, to withhold the rain. The fields dry. The crops fail. Again, Enki intervenes. He tells Atra-hasis to redirect the prayers to Adad. The rains return. The third cycle. Another 1,200 years. Enlil cuts off the sea. He stops the salt flats from producing salt. He blocks the rivers from yielding fish. The Akkadian text describes the results. The surviving lines of Tablet 2 are harrowing. The text says that parents ate their own children. Cannibalism, the absolute bottom of the survival curve. Even this Atra-hasis survives through the intervention of Enki. The fourth cycle. Enlil decides on a final solution: a flood. He binds all the gods by an oath of secrecy. No one may warn the humans. Enki finds a loophole. He speaks through a wall of reeds. Atra-hasis builds a boat. The flood comes. 7 days and 7 nights. The gods themselves are terrified. They crouch against the wall of heaven and weep. Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The parallel account preserved on tablet K3 375 in the British Museum says the gods curled up like dogs. After the waters subside, Atra-hasis offers a sacrifice. The gods descend on the altar like flies over food. They have not eaten in 7 days because there are no humans to feed them. 4 attempts to end civilization. Plague, drought, famine, flood. 3 of them failed. 1 succeeded. And the text says the interval between each attempt was 1,200 years. Stephanie Daly of Oxford translates the opening of the cycle in her 2000 edition of Myths from Mesopotamia. 600 years, less than 600, passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The Atra-hasis Epic does not describe 6 separate civilizations. It describes one civilization subjected to 4 extinction-level events at regular intervals. But the structure is cyclical, and the implication is that the current world, the world that exists after the flood, is the latest iteration in a series of destructions and rebuildings. The Eridu Genesis, preserved on tablet CBS 10673 in the University of Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia, makes the reset explicit. The tablet was excavated at Nippur and first published by Arno Poebel in 1914. Thorkild Jacobson reconstructed the full narrative in the Journal of Biblical Literature in 1981 and gave it the name Eridu Genesis. The text describes the same 5 cities as the king list. Eridu is given to Enki, Bad-tibira to the prince and the sacred one, Larak to Pabilsag, Sippar to Utu, Shuruppak to Ansud. The gods establish the divine decrees, the Me, and distribute them across the 5 cities. Then the assembly of the gods votes. The decision is explicit. The seed of mankind is to be destroyed. The flood comes. Ziusudra, the Sumerian flood hero, survives in a boat. After the waters recede, civilization must be rebuilt from nothing. The Me must be redistributed. The cities must be refounded. The entire infrastructure of human life, from kingship to agriculture to temple ritual, must be reinstalled. This is what the Sumerians meant by a reset. It is not just physical destruction. It is the erasure of the operating system. The Me, the divine decrees that govern every aspect of civilization, are wiped. Without the ME, humanity is animals. The flood does not just kill people, it deletes the program. The 7 Apkallu, the antediluvian sages listed in the Neo-Assyrian incantation series Bit Meseri, are the mechanism the gods use to reload the program after the crash. Reichel Borger identified the Bit Meseri list in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies in 1974. Alan Lenzi of the University of the Pacific published the definitive study of the Uruk list of kings and sages, Tablet W 20037, in the Journal of Ancient Near Eastern Religions in 2008. Before the flood, the 7 sages are divine fish beings who teach humanity everything. After the flood, they are replaced by mortal scholars, human experts called Umanu, who inherit the knowledge but lack the divine nature. The cuneiform record explicitly distinguishes 2 civilizations of humanity, one taught by gods, one taught by men. The boundary between them is the flood. The difference between the two is not just personnel. It is ontological. The antediluvian sages were Puradu fish, creatures born in the Apasu, the freshwater abyss beneath the earth. Created by Enki himself, they wore fish skin cloaks with the fish head draped over their own like a hood. F.A.M. Wigerman classified them in his 1992 study Mesopotamian Protective Spirits, published as Cuneiform Monographs Volume 1. The post-flood sages were merely human. The best of them, the text says, was 2/3 Apkallu, 2/3, not whole, not complete, a diminished inheritance. The Era Epic, the 8th century Babylonian poem preserved on at least 36 tablets, makes the transition irreversible. Marduk himself says he sent those craftsmen down to the Apsu and ordered them not to come back up. The divine teachers were removed from the surface of the earth by the king of the gods. Whatever humanity knows now, it knows from mortal memory of divine teaching. The original source is gone. The direct line to the antediluvian knowledge has been cut. This is what separates the Sumerian worldview from the modern one. In the Sumerian system, civilization is not a continuous accumulation. It is a series of installations that can be uninstalled. The me can be withdrawn. The sages can be banished. The cities can be drowned. And each time the system restarts, the new version is a little less than the one before. The lamentation texts add a second layer of cyclical destruction to the post-flood world. 5. Sumerian city laments survive. The lamentation over the destruction of Ur. The lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Ur. Edited by Mikalovsky for Eisenbronze in 1989. The Lament for Eridu, published by Margaret Green in the Journal of Cuneiform Studies in 1978. The Lament for Nippur, preserved on tablet CBS 13,856 in the Penn Museum. And the Lament for Uruk. These texts describe real historical events. The fall of the 3rd dynasty of Ur around 2004 BC, the invasion by the Elamites, the capture of the last king, Ibbi-Sin. But the scribes who composed these laments did not write them as history. They wrote them as theology. Each city falls because the divine assembly votes to withdraw its kingship. The gods abandon their temples. The me are overturned. The text says the divine powers of the city were transformed into inimical decrees. Then the city is destroyed. Then, at the end of each lament, a rebuilding hymn appears. The patron god returns. The me are restored. Civilization restarts. The lamentation over Sumer and Ur contains the line that summarizes the entire Sumerian worldview on this subject. Enlil tells the moon god Nana, Ur was indeed given kingship, but it was not given an eternal reign. From time immemorial, since the land was founded, until people multiplied, who has ever seen a reign of kingship that would take precedence forever? The reign of its kingship had been long indeed, but had to exhaust itself. No civilization is permanent. That is a Sumerian theologian, writing on a real clay tablet, in a real museum, telling his audience that every kingdom ends. The question is not whether your city will fall. The question is when. The Babylonians did not just believe in cyclical destruction, they performed it. Every spring, during the Akatu festival in Babylon, the priests recited the Enuma Elish, the creation epic, from beginning to end. The cosmos was symbolically unmade and remade. The king was stripped of his regalia before the statue of Marduk and struck on the cheek by a priest. His crown and scepter were placed on a chair in front of the god. The king knelt and swore that he had not sinned against the city. Only then did the priest restore the symbols of office. Karel van der Toorn analyzed the festival in his 1991 contribution to the Vetus Testamentum Congress volume. The Akitu was not a harvest celebration. It was an annual civilizational reboot. Every Nisanu, every spring, Babylon deleted itself and started over. The archaeology of Mesopotamia partially confirms the literary record. In 1928, Leonard Woolley of the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania excavated a deep sounding at Ur and found a layer of clean water-laid clay 3.7 meters thick, deposited between two occupation levels. Below the clay was Ubaid period pottery. Above it was the material culture of the later city. Woolley announced to the press that he had found Noah's flood. Stephen Langdon, working at Kish, the same year, found a similar flood stratum. Eric Schmidt of the University of Pennsylvania found a flood deposit at Shuruppak, the city of the Sumerian flood hero Ziusudra, in 1931. He published the results in the museum journal under the title Excavations at Farah. The flood layers are real. The debate is about what they mean. Max Mallowan, who had been Woolley's assistant, published a reassessment in the journal Iraq in 1964 and concluded that the Ur deposit was far too early to correspond to the Shuruppak event. The Ur clay dates to roughly 3,500 before the Common Era. The Shuruppak and Kish deposits date to roughly 2,900 before the Common Era. These are not one flood. They are multiple floods, separated by centuries at different sites. The Mesopotamian floodplain genuinely experienced civilization-ending flooding events repeatedly within the span of human memory. The scribes did not invent the concept of cyclical destruction. They lived it. Niels Axel Morner of Stockholm University proposed in Archaeological Discovery in 2015 that the Ur flood layer corresponds to a mid-Holocene sea level peak around 5,000 years ago, when the Persian Gulf coast was roughly 200 kilometers further inland than it is today. Ur was not a desert city. It was, for a period, nearly coastal. The floods that destroyed the antediluvian cities were not divine punishment in the archaeological record. They were geography. Southern Mesopotamia is a flat alluvial plain with almost no gradient. When the rivers rose or the Gulf transgressed, there was nothing to stop the water. The 5 cities of the king list sat on a floodplain that could be erased by a single season of high water. The Sumerians knew this. They built their cities on tells, artificial mounds raised above the flood level over centuries of continuous habitation. Each layer of a tell is a civilization built on top of the ruins of the previous one. The archaeological structure of a Mesopotamian tell is, in physical form, exactly what the king list describes in text. Layer after layer, city after city, each one rising from the rubble of the last. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, makes the deepest version of the argument. The current cosmos is not the first. It is built from the corpse of the previous one. Marduk kills Tiamat, the primordial salt sea, and splits her body in two. He makes the sky from one half and the earth from the other. Heaven and earth are not creations from nothing. They are renovations of a destroyed structure. The cosmos itself, in Babylonian theology, is a second-generation building. It sits on the bones of the first. The competitor channels say 6 civilizations. The cuneiform record does not give a neat count. What it gives is a structure. There was a primordial chaos, which Marduk destroyed to build the cosmos. There was an antediluvian civilization of 5 cities and 8 kings, taught by divine fish sages and ruled for 250,000 years, which the gods destroyed by flood. Between the creation and the flood, there were 3 failed extinction attempts at intervals of 1,200 years. Each one a near reset that was averted only because one god broke ranks. After the flood, there was a new civilization, taught by mortal scholars instead of divine sages, rebuilt from nothing, with population controls installed to prevent the noise from getting too loud again. And within that post-flood world, there were at least 5 major city destructions, each one treated by the scribes as a divine decision to withdraw the ME and start over. Count them however you want. The point is the same. The Sumerians did not believe they were living in the first version of the world. They believed they were living in the latest. They knew the cities before them had fallen. They knew the gods had tried to erase humanity more than once. They knew the divine decrees could be withdrawn at any time. And every spring, in the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, they reenacted the destruction and rebuilding of the cosmos as a public ceremony. Because the lesson of every text on every tablet in every library they maintained was the same. The world ends, and then it starts again. And the only thing that survives is the record. The Weld-Blundell prism is still in Oxford. The Atra-hasis tablets are still in the British Museum. The Eridu Genesis is still in Philadelphia. The Lament for Nippur is still in the Penn Museum. The line is still on all of them. The flood swept over. And after the flood swept over, and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. That is what the tablets say. They have been saying it for 4,000 years. The prism in Oxford is still inscribed with the names of 8 kings who ruled 5 cities for 250,000 years. The tablets in the British Museum still record the 4 attempts to exterminate a species that would not stay quiet. The tablet in Philadelphia still describes the moment the Divine Assembly voted to erase the seed of mankind. And the lamentation texts, scattered across a dozen museums from London to Istanbul to Baghdad, still describe the night the gods walked out of their temples, the night the Me were overturned, the night the cities that had stood for 1,000 years were reduced to rubble, and then, slowly, stone by stone, rebuilt. The Sumerians did not believe in progress. They believed in repetition, and the clay they wrote on has outlasted every civilization that came after them.